Corinna,
Yes, Julie. Julie.
are you living your most fulfilling life?
Mm, sometimes,
Truth or dare? Truth
most
or
of the
dare?
time,
Are you?
85% of the time.
That was very unconvincing. We're gonna have an interesting conversation with Jeff Leisawitz,
Yes, we
who
are.
who really understands about living your fulfilling life as a creative.
Well, and all the challenges that creatives face since he's one himself, an award-winning producer who has been a musician his entire life.
Heck yeah. Did you know? Well, everyone's gonna get to know who he called on the telephone to jam with,
No kidding.
a
Yeah.
famous rock star, which is super cool at the end of this episode.
Yes, and I think it's really just important for people to note as they settle down to listen in that Jeff really is about living life fearlessly and going after what he wants, and he's not effing around. So,
He isn't, and he didn't swear as much as I thought he would.
well, the book title that we're going to go into is literally called Not Effing Around. And I want to get this right, so I'm pulling it up. The No Bullshit Guide for Getting Your Creative Dreams Off the Ground. And you can get free chapters now just by going to his website, jeffleisawitz.com, and giving your first name and your email address. So you can get a taste of what we're talking about today with him.
And all the links will be in our show notes, so if you don't know how to spell Leisowitz, it's okay, either do we. But what we know is he's a really nice guy, and the conversation about failing fast, about shining, then crashing, and rising again is a story of all our lives, especially as creatives.
Yes, and especially as podcasters or authors or public speakers, understanding that you're not always your 100% top best. You can learn from your mistakes, you can fail quicker, make those adjustments, build out your list of what's working and what's not working. I love what we have to share with the team today, just with everybody today.
Karina, have you ever failed before?
Oh, many times, yes.
Really?
Mhm. Fallen
Oh,
flat on my face riding a motorcycle.
oh my
That's for
goodness.
one. So, I mean, everybody this is something even from the world of motorcycling. Everyone crashes.
Oh,
It happens to everybody. And so, as you're learning to do something as dangerous as ride a motorcycle, you get really
wow.
familiar with things like a helmet and your appropriate gear, and you're wearing armor to ensure that when you do fall, because you will, that you'll live to tell the story and ride another day. And I think that that same ethos comes into all things that we do creatively too, because you aren't always going to succeed. You are going to fall on your face a little bit here and there, figuratively and literally.
And that is spoken from the boss, Corinna Belizzi, who, as we see, and when I look at her, you think that she is perfectly polished. She is so well articulated. But to know that we are all struggling through things, especially when we are trying to strive for our dreams, and our dreams can look so different, but it's so important to know that you're not alone and failure is a lesson that we learn. And I think Jeff will really articulate and emphasize the fact that this is where we become better humans.
And this is where we can become our own best dragonfly, right? Evolve
Oh,
into our highest
mhm.
selves.
Yeah, I love that. And funny enough, a little backstory for y'all. You know, take a look at those spams you get in your email. Take a look at those cold emails you receive because there is power in really reaching out to people and understanding who you're reaching out to because you never know those relationships you'll build. Jeff literally sent me an email. I would call it a cold email, just
A
pitching me to
one-liner.
a
Mhm,
one-liner to be
mhm.
on a podcast. And I think I was having a bad day. I was annoyed. I'm like, why am I getting so many spams? And I responded to him. He said, "Oh, I love your podcast." I'm like, "Which podcast are you talking about, dude?" And then he went on and he responded immediately and was saying, talking about another podcast that I host, Obsessed. I'm like, wait, okay, he knows what he's talking about. And then he sent me his book, Not Effing Around, and he immediately grabbed my attention. And Karina's like, who are we talking to today? I go,
Yeah.
it's Jeff. He wrote me an email. He's got to be on our podcast.
Well, let's think about this though. You are actually communicating to everybody here that we've had some success as podcasters because remember the days when you were first starting out with Obsessed when it was like, "Oh, I've got to get somebody to be on the show." Now you have
Mhm.
people reaching out to
Oh, yeah,
us and you're
that's
like, "Wait,
true.
which podcast are we talking about here?" So, I mean, through the power of consistency, through keeping at this thing, through making yourself known in this world and putting out this content, you're becoming sought after. And heck, Jeff wanted to be on Obsessed. I'm sure you'll
And
bring him
now
back
it's
for that. Now he's on the Media Casters.
yeah. I was thinking perhaps he'd be a better guest, but it speaks to when you're pitching somebody to be on their podcast, to know who you're speaking to and to really create a unique dialogue, as Jeff did with us.
Yes, he did. It was great.
And this is the dialogue that you're gonna listen to. It's great. It's really inspiring, and he's a smart guy. And I'm glad that he did send me that email, Karina.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the power of sending a note and just responding here and
Mhm.
there, it can bring you surprises and
Right,
good ones.
right. And don't be a stalker. Just be informed.
Let's
An
kick it with
informed
Jeff.
stalker. Let's kick it with Jeff.
Kick it.
Kick it.
Welcome to the Media Casters with your business besties, Corinna Jules and Julie Loken. In every episode, you'll get behind-the-scenes access to experts who share their struggles and successes in podcasting, publishing, and presenting. So grab a pen, grab your bestie, and kick it with Corinna and Jules.
We're joined today by somebody who is not effing around, and that's Jeff Leisawitz. Jeff actually connected with Julie via an email early on, and we just had to bring him on, right, Jules?
He stood out, and I have to say that I have never, ever responded with such vigor, and I don't wanna call it a spam email, but I we do get a lot of emails pitching, and I guess this is a good lesson for people that are pitching podcasts. He said to me, "I really love your podcast. I'd love to." I can actually pull it up, but it was very polite, but he said, "I really love your podcast," and he put, like, misspellings in the subject. I'm like, "Oh, that's on purpose, I think." But so
They
I'm
tell
like
you to do that, but that doesn't mean that's why it happened.
but I
Exactly.
responded, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah?" And I think I was in a salty mood that day, and I said, "Oh, yeah?"
It must have been my fault. I'm the one who puts her
Yeah,
in a salty mood.
yeah. No, she makes me a better human, but I responded, "Oh, yeah? Which podcast are you talking about?" Because I've, a couple podcasts, but he responded. He actually knew the podcast Obsessed. So, thus, we have Jeff here, and he's not effing around.
He's not
And
effing around.
if
That's
you don't
right.
like
Thanks for having me.
swears, you might not like Jeff,
Yep, that's right.
or you might love Jeff just because of that.
It's hard to say whether you like swears or not. Hopefully, you get something out of this.
So, just from the pitch perspective, h how are you doing it, and why did I tell me why you got my attention, if you know?
Why I got your
Mhm.
attention? Well, I suppose I hit you on the right day. In one sense, I believe I followed up at least once or twice. So you got that action moving forward. Why else? It was personalized. I don't know, something you wanted to talk about.
Well, because you answered my question, you didn't put up with my salty attitude, meaning, "Oh, yeah? Well, which podcast?" And you came back, and that personalized approach to pitching people to be on their shows, I think speaks to the hosts.
Well,
Oh,
you're also talking
absolutely.
about a one-liner, right? He didn't send you a diatribe email that
Right.
was too long to get through either.
Yeah.
Right. You
I don't
definitely
read
want
those.
to keep it short. Yeah.
Keep it short, keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yes.
But you definitely did get our attention as we are the media casters. And what I love that you do is that you are speaking to creatives. You're telling people who really you're speaking to me actually. Just you're speaking to creatives that know they're meant for more and not really sure how to go about it because they're listening to the naysayers. They are in a space of self-doubt. Tell us a little bit about that, Jeffrey.
Well, there are plenty of naysayers in the world, whether that is coming from, your family or your family history, peers, marketing messages, all those kinds of things generally tell us, you know, either subtly or covertly that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not capable enough to do the kinds of things that we want to do. So a lot of people, I think, tend to settle for lives that are less than they could be, both in career and in many other ways. So as a coach, I kind of work on two different levels. One is what I call the outer world. And that is, what are the strategies? What are your habits? What are just smart moves to do in the world that's going to help step you forward in whatever your goal is. And then the second part is what I call the inner world. And that's the psychology and really the subconscious psychology that tends to drive us, right? So we all have beliefs about the world and identities about ourselves that are built in from childhood. And if these are positive, that's great. If you believe, hey, I'm smart and good looking and capable and all that kind of stuff, fantastic. Everything in your life kind of runs through that system. And then you're going to act and make choices based on that. But if you have some subconscious beliefs or identities that say, oh, I'm not really that smart. And when it gets hard, I kind of tend to quit. And, maybe it's not really worth it anyway. Then, no matter what happens, even if it's something positive and good, it's still going to run through that system. And you will, again, make choices and often even sabotage um, positive things in your life. So I really kind of work on both levels to help people understand what they really want to do, why they want to do it, because that's another huge piece. Why do we want to do the things that we want to do? If we're not really fully tapped into that, we're never fully energized, right? And we want to be fully energized and fully aligned so we can kick ass, right?
Well, and you're also well, you have a bit of experience working in the field of music. I understand you're an award-winning producer as well. So I'd love for you to talk about your experience in that sort of media.
Sure. Well, I have been writing songs and playing music since I've been about 14 years old. Just a super brief bio. I've had thousands of placements on film and TV. I teach songwriting at a college. I was a music journalist for the big radio station that broke grunge music to the world. I've made records. I've had a million streams. I'm like pretty into music. I've been around this for quite a while.
Well, I love that too because I'm extremely into music as a consumer of it.
Oh, great.
So, just not so much as a musician. My father is a musician, he can pick up any instrument and play it within minutes, and
Cool.
I just didn't have that
Mm,
innate skill set.
yeah. So so that's a background. What exactly do you think your listeners would like to know about the music business or
Well, I know, I've coached a lot of creatives. I've coached musicians, I've coached authors, writer, those people that when you are a true creative creator and when you're a true artist, it is something within you that if it does not get out, you die a slow death. And then when they're met with this creation that they put out in the world, they a lot of times I see creatives don't have that business savvy to figure out which way to go or what way to turn. And I love your quote in your book that we shine, we crash, and then we rise again. And that is the carousel, if you will, that I feel a lot of creatives are on.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, being a creative is a bold path. Let's just say that. I mean, every path in life is a bold path because life is, freaking tough in a lot of ways. But if you're a creative, you're all, unless you happen to get hired, at an ad agency or something like that, you're kind of forging your own path day after day after day. And not only are you forging your path, but the world around you changes. I mean, 20 years ago, what was going on in the music business is nothing like what was happening now. So you really have to know what's going on, know where your value is, understand different ways to connect with audiences, all this kind of stuff, the same thing that really any other entrepreneur or solopreneur would do, right? It's just you're selling something which in many cases is sort of taken for granted, I think, by the world. You know, in my concept, creativity is not a luxury item. It is the heartbeat of what makes us human, right? Yes, we got to get fed, we got to get shelter, all that kind of stuff, right? But without creativity, without music and books and stories and all this kind of stuff, what would there be, right? But even with that, creativity is often very devalued by the general public, right? So we have to figure out ways to make it more valuable for people so that they want to buy it. If you're doing this as a profession, right? I'm not saying every creative could or should be um, doing that. If you've got a day job and you like it, or you're doing your entrepreneur thing or whatever, fantastic. Play guitar and sing songs at night. you
Well,
know?
I've worked with a lot of people in the world of graphic design and brand building, and I think they all essentially at some point get to this revelation where they say, I've basically been making other people successful throughout my career, and I've left myself with very little. All of my
Yes.
creative energy has gone towards this brand or this effort or this advertising effort, and so they're left fulfilled by the fact that they've seen some successes occur, but they haven't really been able to take ownership for them and call them their own. And so there's like this quiet little depression that creeps in and makes them feel a little bit less like they've been as successful as they wanted to be as an artist. And so I think that can be a really difficult balance and, really getting to the point where they can sustain themselves from an economic standpoint and also feed that juice where they're feeling like their creativity is birthed into the world and they're valued for it can be a real struggle. So I wonder what you would say to that individual that's working to really shine as an artist, have their
Mhm.
voice heard, because it's something we talk about a lot on the media cast. Like the media casters, just having your voice heard, getting it in front of the right people so that you can realize your dreams.
Absolutely. So what you described there is a very typical path. And I think the way it starts is, you're young. Ooh, I love visual arts. Okay. You kind of take a look at it, or your parents, kind of give you some crap. It's like, yeah, you want to be a professional painter? Forget it. Right. It's never going to happen. That's the message. That's the
Mhm.
naysayer. Okay, but you could do graphic design or web design or something like that. Okay, great. There's definitely tons of jobs. So you go into that because you love the thing.
Mhm.
And then you do the thing and you do the thing and you do it for somebody else, and maybe they're successful with it. But all the while, the the core of your own expression is getting lost. You're expressing, but you're expressing on behalf of the client or the employer. Right? So yes, it gets to that point. So what do you do? Well, I would highly suggest anyone who's kind of in that space to take some time and to really honor their own creativity. And I know this is difficult because you're spending all day being creative for somebody else,
Mhm.
right? However, it it pays both in your job and in your life to take the time to really find some time to create something that matters to you, and for it to really matter, and to finish it and to put it out into the world, right? And this doesn't have to be a huge thing. This can be, I'm going to do one comic strip a week and put it on Instagram. Fantastic. You would be shocked, or people out there would be shocked at how a simple um, output like that and sharing it with the world can be so effective, um, it, as a gift to yourself, really.
It is a gift. Creativity is a gift, and I love that because my background, Jeff, I know you've done the research, you know what podcast you're on, but I have always had a desire to write. It just came out of me naturally since I was as soon as I could hold a pen or a pencil.
Mm.
And then I went to undergrad for journalism. And then I'm like, wait, you only make like $5 an hour being a journalist. This isn't going to work because I like clothes too much. But, and that stifled my creativity. And then as we navigate our lives, then I'm like, what do I do next? I can do marketing. Why don't I go to law school? Okay. Why don't I become a coach? But as I am maturing, if you will, because I'm a woman of a certain age, everything I'm doing goes back to my writing, and that's where I find that pure pleasure and joy,
Mm.
and I think it's to understand that, number 1. Number 2, think outside the box on how you are going to provide for yourself or your family, make a living. It doesn't always look the way that we think it's gonna look when we're 5 years old. "I'm gonna write a book. I'm gonna be Laura Ingalls Wilder." That's who I wanted to be. Corinna, do
Yeah,
you know who she is? Laura
Yeah, I
Ingalls
know who
yeah,
she is,
yeah,
Little House on
Okay,
sure.
the
good.
Prairie.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes, so I mean that is absolutely true, and I think most people who have lived long enough realize that our lives rarely look much like we thought they would look when we were 10 years old, right? It just kind of doesn't happen that much. So you're right, and it kind of brings me to a concept that I love and I use with my clients all the time. It's a Japanese concept called ikigai.
Oh, I know this, the reason why we wake every morning,
Mm.
ikigai. I love
Yes,
that.
exactly.
It is a beautiful concept, I feel, and go ahead, Jeff, but I feel like that's where everybody wants to be.
All right. So the way I understand it is it's the intersection of various factors in our lives. One is, what do you love? Right? So what do you love is one part. What are you good at? So of course there are things that you love that you might not be good at. So you got to get good at them. And then what does the world need? Right? The world needs a whole bunch of stuff. And then what will the world pay for? If you can put these four things together, that is your sweet spot. And that is a wonderful, uh, you know, place to kind of shoot for your creative or any kind of endeavors, really, if once again, you're looking to get paid for it. And again, getting paid for it is great, but it is not the only thing in the world.
Not the only thing, it's a driver. It's a driver for a lot of people, and that's where I see this divergence of people who are stuck in the corporate stronghold that are bound by those golden handcuffs, and they're so miserable. I feel like this is where I find a lot of my clients come from, where they are just miserable, but they need to pay a check, and it is a scary place, but you can do it, and the Japanese culture fascinates me, and as you mentioned ikigai, I'm so excited that you brought that up because the Japanese culture sees no definition or boundaries between your personal life and your professional life. Everything is one and the same, and to find something that you love to do, that you wanna do all the time, like play the guitar or write a book or, dance or act, it shouldn't be any difference. There should be no differentiation between that and your personal life. It should all be one and the same.
Absolutely. I mean, there are different people have different views. There's a lot of ways to do life. I knew a guy years ago, and he was a great drummer. He had this day job that he loved that paid really well. And I was still, like working on being a rock star at the time. And I was trying to understand, I was talking to him like, why would you do this? Don't you want to share your music? Don't you want to? He's like, no, I want to go to my job, do it well, do it right, get paid, come home, spend as much money as I want on drums, and I don't really care if anybody else hears it. I was like, okay, we all make our choices. We all have different drives.
Yeah, that's true. And if he was fulfilled by his work and he gained pleasure through playing the drums and didn't turn playing the drums into work, I mean, that could have taken some of the joy out of it for him, which I think is often what people confront. They have an idea about what it will be to be a musician or what their life will look like when they are. And they don't realize, let's say, the work that goes into it and for lack of a better term, the bullshit you have to swallow to make things
Oh,
happen.
you just dropped the bomb, girl, the
I
first
know I
bomb of the
did.
day.
I want to talk about your book
Mm.
because I think
Yes.
that this is part of what intrigued both Julie
Mhm.
and myself because I'm not effing around, but you called the title of your book Not Effing Around, right?
That's right.
Mhm.
So, talk to us about this. Why did you write it? And why did you choose to lean into something that is, let's say, a little bit racy as your title?
Yeah, so
You got
not
our attention, though. I'm
uh,
saying you did get our
I mean, it
attention.
does work. Not effing around, the no bullshit guide for getting your creative dreams off the ground. So first of all, with the title, yes, there are cuss words in this thing. So when you polarize in any way, any kind of with language, or of course we see this in politics and everything else, people people gravitate or they don't, right? Some people are like, oh my god, that book title's awesome, like you guys. And some people are like, I can't, but like, do you really have to use those words? I'm like, you're not really, I'm
You're
not
not my
not,
demo.
not my demo.
Wait,
I'm not really.
was that, like, your mother asking you? "Jeffrey, did you have to use those words?"
Nah, she never gave me shit on that. So, what is the book about? I mean, the book is essentially the reason why I wrote the book is because I have been a creative like my whole life. And I've had, some pretty solid successes and tons of fails all the way through the line. And I've banged my head against the wall night and day for decades. So this book is my attempt to help others bang their head against the wall a little bit less because you'll still do it, believe me, right? It's just how can we find the shortcuts and the hacks and the moves to get through this thing and reach our goals and be fulfilled. Because as you sort of mentioned, there's plenty of people who get to their goals and they're not fulfilled. Oh my God, what a disaster. You get $1 million, you get a paycheck, you get all this fame and fortune or
And you
something.
hate
And
life,
yeah, like
right?
that is like a serious fail,
Mhm.
right? But again, in my book, I talk about this. Fail fast and reframe what failing means. Failing is such a scary word. Nobody likes to do it. But the truth is, failure is your only way to success. And if we don't consider it failure, we consider it feedback, it lightens it up and you start to understand that every time you don't get to your goal, instead of freaking out about it and or quitting, you take a breath, you ask as many questions as you can about what worked and what did not work. You understand it better, you iterate, you do the thing again, and guess what? You're probably still not going to get fully to your goal, but that's okay because you get more feedback. You do the same process and you just keep going.
I love that. I really do. I had the pleasure of interviewing Mo Gaudet, who used to be he was a chief business officer at Google. Okay. So climbed the ladder really quickly. He's, I guess, in his early 40s at this point. He's now written a book about happiness, and he's also written another about the power of AI. And he shared really candidly on my podcast, Care More, Be Better, which is my other show, that he had achieved all these things, had the house, had the beautiful wife, had the children, had all the money he could really ever imagine needing or wanting and more, and woke up one day and was completely miserable and realized that something had to change. And so his podcast is called Slow Mo because the whole concept is really slowing down. But I think also just really getting honest and frank with yourself about what truly makes you happy and not letting it be the keeping up with the Joneses or the Tesla that your neighbor has and, what constructs that you may have inherited from your family or from your friend circle about the things that you're supposed to want. Because if you are constantly driving after the things that you're supposed to want without ever checking in with yourself for the things that you do want, then you're going to end up in that situation where you've driven yourself to probably near burnout, if not complete burnout, to health collapse potentially, and to a space where you're just not happy with how you got there. You're not happy with where you are, and you may not even be able to clearly see how to get yourself into a situation where you can get to that happiness and live your most fulfilling life.
I
So,
would totally agree, and I think that that theme is part of the great American myth around this stuff. That you
yeah,
got to have more and better and bigger and richer and more beautiful and all these kinds of things that just keep us going, keep us running around in circles.
it's the
And
hamster wheel.
it's a hamster wheel. So, y- you know, I believe that confidence is knowing your own truth, right? When you know your own truth, there's a confidence there. And the joy comes from knowing that truth, even when the culture or the family or the peers are, you know, unaligned with that, right?
Mhm.
So the culture tells you you got to work your ass off to be a millionaire, right? But hey, you know what? I'm cool with this little apartment and reading books half the day, right? If you can step into that with truth, you will be happier
Yeah,
uh,
100%.
if that's your jam. Yeah.
Jeff, amazing insights that you are bringing to the table, and it's really making me think. And I have college-age children, and for some reason, I gave birth to little boys that like to play music. One's a guitarist, one is a drummer. And I tell them, follow your joy, be able to support yourself, but follow your joy. And again, my oldest, he's like going into pre-law, and I'm like, I'm not sure that's your joy, but it's a whole cycle of learning. And I love that. I guess I'm fascinated as we wrap this up. Who is someone who is the most famous person that you've jammed with? Go, Jeff.
um, that I've actually played music with. I think I've got a pretty good story on that, actually.
Oh,
So,
this is gonna be good, guys.
so
Hold on to your seatbelts.
way back in the day, I was a huge fan of the band Edie, Brickell, and the New
Oh,
Bohemians.
yeah.
Oh, I'm not aware of too many things.
I'm not aware of too many isn't that, what's his name's wife? Steve
Paul Simon married her.
Oh, Paul Simon.
Philosophy.
Yes,
Oh,
Paul
look at
Simon.
you. Sing it, Karina.
No,
We
no,
we
I
don't
don't need to
judge
torture
here.
you.
We don't judge.
Okay, so I had moved to Seattle maybe 5 or 6 years after they were really popular. And I was outside at a concert one time, and it was Edie singing with a different band. She had a different band. It wasn't the New Bohemians. And I was just talking to some guy there, and he said, "Oh, yeah, the guitar player from the New Bohemians lives in Seattle." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I had no idea. So a couple months later, I'm at home and I'm listening to their record, and I'm like, "Huh, I should just look in the phone book." That's how long ago this was. If the guy is listed in the phone book.
OMG.
Yeah, so he was. I called him up. I'm like, "Hey, is this Kenny from the New Bohemians?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I'm Jeff. I play bass. Do you want to jam?" He's like, "Yeah."
Holy cow.
So
That's a
then
great story.
it
Who does
also
that?
turns out that another guy from the band, John, the percussionist, was also lived in town. So we got together, and it was drums and guitar, and I played bass, and it sounded like Jeff and the New Bohemians. It was like the coolest thing ever.
Oh, I love that.
That's amazing, and that just speaks to the power of just asking as well.
And now, I mean, these days it's even easier because there's all these social media things and LinkedIn and all this. You can reach out to anybody. Doesn't mean they're going to respond, but it's easy to find them.
Yeah, that's for
Yeah,
certain. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff.
sure.
This has been a pure joy. We do have something we ask all of our guests to
Yes.
do before we sign off,
Get
and that's
ready.
to say,
Do your voice.
you say two words for us with enthusiasm. Kick it.
Kick it.
Yes.
I was going to go for fuck yeah.
Okay, do that
Ah!
too.
Okay, that was really good.
Mhm.
Guys, if there are children in the room, please remove them immediately.
Yes. Remove them 10 seconds ago.
Thanks, Jeff. It was a pleasure. I'm so glad that I read your email and responded to it in a salty way because this is how connections are made and this is how lives are changed. Every experience, every person we meet changes the trajectory of our lives. So thank you, Jeff.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Media Casters. You can keep this conversation going and kick it with Corinna and Jules in live office hours each week. Visit themediacasters.mn.co to sign up. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe whenever you listen. Let's kick it.